You know that feeling when you get a raise, and for about 3 days you think, okay, this is it. This is when things start to change. And then somehow, 3 months later, you're in exactly the same place. Same account balance, same low-grade money anxiety, same mental math at the end of the month that never quite adds up. And you think, where did it go? I'm working harder than I've ever worked. I make more than I've ever made, so why does it feel exactly the same? That's not a discipline problem. That's not a budgeting failure. That's your brain doing something completely predictable in response to a system that was never designed to help you get ahead, only to keep you moving. Here's what nobody tells you about people who work hard but still can't save money. They call you irresponsible. You're actually someone whose brain is responding normally to an abnormal amount of pressure. They call you bad with money. You're actually someone who never got a real chance to be good with it, because every time you got close, the ground shifted. They call you undisciplined. You're actually exhausted. And exhausted people don't optimize. They survive. You're not failing at saving. You're succeeding at getting through. And those are different things. Here's the thing. There's a name for what happens when your income goes up and your savings don't. Economists and psychologists both study it. They call it lifestyle inflation. And the mechanism isn't about weakness or lack of willpower. It's about how the brain handles an increase in resources. When you earn more, your baseline shifts. What felt like a treat becomes normal. What felt like normal starts to feel insufficient. The number gets bigger, the feeling of enough never arrives. And here's what makes it almost impossible to fight. Lifestyle inflation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like overspending. It feels like finally living the way someone who works this hard should be living. The slightly nicer apartment because you deserve it. The food delivery because you're too tired to cook after a 10-hour day. The subscription you don't cancel because it's only $12 and you've been meaning to use it. None of it feels like a decision. It just feels like keeping up with the version of yourself your salary implies you should be. By the time you notice, the new baseline is already set, and going back feels like punishment. But then there's something else happening here. Underneath the lifestyle inflation is something that rarely gets named in personal finance conversations, and it should. Researchers studying financial stress found that chronic financial pressure doesn't just make you worried, it literally changes how your brain makes decisions. Scarcity, even moderate scarcity, pulls your attention so completely toward the immediate problem that long-term thinking becomes almost neurologically inaccessible. So you're not failing to think about the future because you don't care about it. You're failing to think about the future because your brain is completely occupied managing today. The cognitive bandwidth that's supposed to go toward planning, toward saving, toward building, it's already spent. On the commute, on the job, on the low-level hum of not quite having enough that follows you from Sunday night to Friday afternoon without ever fully letting go. And then something small goes wrong. A car repair, a medical bill, a month where the hours were cut. And whatever you managed to set aside disappears. Not because you were careless, because the margin was never real to begin with. Now here's where it gets interesting. There's a specific moment most people experience that nobody talks about honestly. It's the moment you realize that working more isn't actually moving the line. You picked up the extra shift. You took the freelance project. You said yes to the overtime. And the account balance at the end of the month looked almost identical to the month before. That moment, when the math stops working, is not a personal failure. It's a structural revelation. Because the premise that hard work produces financial security was never a universal truth. It was a story told to people whose labor someone else needed. Work harder, earn more, save more, get ahead. Clean, linear, motivating. And for a specific set of people in a specific set of circumstances, sometimes true. But for the majority of people working full-time jobs in 2026, with rent at historic highs, wages that haven't kept pace with costs in decades, and a financial system designed to extract rather than accumulate, it is, at best, an incomplete picture. At worst, it's a way of making structural failure feel like personal failure. You didn't fall behind because you didn't work hard enough. You fell behind because the math was already against you before you started. But let's clear something up. The personal finance industry, the books, the influencers, the latte factor crowd, has built an entire economy around the idea that your financial situation is primarily a behavior problem. Skip the coffee, meal prep on Sundays, cancel the subscriptions, track every dollar. And look, some of that is useful at the margins. But the core message is this: if you're not saving, it's because you're doing something wrong. And that message is not just incomplete, it's profitable. Because people who feel guilty about their financial situation buy books about how to fix it. They pay for courses. They consume content. The personal finance industry doesn't make money when you feel fine. It makes money when you feel like the problem. You are not the problem. You are a person trying to build something in a system that keeps raising the floor while telling you to jump higher. Here's what they don't tell you. The feeling that you should be further along by now, that feeling is not evidence that you've failed. It's evidence that you believed something you were told, and the thing you were told wasn't entirely true. Yeah, you worked hard. That was real. The hours were real. The sacrifice was real. The belief that it would add up was real, and the fact that it didn't add up the way it was supposed to is not a reflection of your character. It's a reflection of a gap between a promise and a system, and you are not the first person to fall into that gap, and you are not the last. What you do with that knowledge is yours to decide, not the influencers, not the financial gurus, not the productivity coach who has never missed a rent payment in their life. Yours. And the first step, the only step that actually matters, is stopping the part where you blame yourself for a problem that was always bigger than your choices. The work was never the issue. The math was. So the next time you check your account and feel that familiar mix of confusion and shame, you worked so hard. Where did it go? Remember that confusion is the correct response to an incorrect promise. You're not bad with money. You're underpaid in a world that keeps telling you to spend. And those are completely different problems with completely different solutions. You don't need more discipline. You need a more honest conversation about what's actually happening. Now tell me, are you team, I got a raise and somehow have less money than before, or team, I've stopped trying to figure out where it goes because it's too depressing? Drop it in the comments. No judgment, only recognition. And if this video made something click that you've been trying to explain to yourself for a while, hit subscribe. We're here every week breaking down the psychology of work that nobody talks about. Because understanding why you are the way you are, that's not just interesting, that's powerful.